The sun hung low in the sky, casting a warm golden light over the vast expanse of the open range. At the heart of this rugged land was the cattle boss, a figure admired by all who worked under him. His name was known far and wide among drovers, not just for his strength, but also for his unwavering bravery. With a wide-brimmed hat shading his sun-kissed face and a well-worn leather vest hugging his sturdy frame, he embodied the spirit of the West. Each drover looked to him for guidance, knowing he would protect them as fiercely as he protected his herd. He understood the challenges they faced, from harsh weather to unpredictable cattle. He would ride out at dawn, leading his team with a steady hand and a determined heart. No matter the situation, he took charge, instilling confidence in his crew. His keen eyes missed nothing. Whether it was a stray calf or an emerging storm on the horizon, he was always prepared to act. On this day, however, danger lurked beyond the hills, something that would soon test his courage like never before. As dawn broke over the ranch, the sounds of clanging spurs and lively chatter filled the air. The drovers, a close-knit group, gathered around the fire for a hearty breakfast of beans and biscuits. Laughter bubbled up as they shared stories from the trail, forging bonds that made their days feel less daunting. After the sun peaked over the horizon, the cattle boss rallied his crew. "Let's get to work," he called, his voice steady and clear. The drovers mounted their horses, ready for another day of herding and caring for the cattle. They moved with purpose, guiding the longhorns to fresh pastures while keeping a watchful eye on their surroundings. Throughout the day, they worked side by side, mending fences, checking water troughs, and ensuring that every animal was accounted for. Each drover had a role to play. Some were skilled ropers, others were expert riders, and together they formed an efficient team. When one drover struggled with a stubborn steer, the others jumped in to lend a hand, showcasing their camaraderie and teamwork. The ranch was not just a workplace. It was a family where everyone played their part in the rhythm of ranch life. Just as the sun climbed higher in the sky, casting bright rays over the herd, a sudden shout echoed across the pasture. The drovers turned in alarm to see one of their own, a young man named Jake, struggling with a restless longhorn. In his eagerness to corral the massive beast, Jake lost his footing and was thrown off balance. The longhorn bolted, knocking him to the ground with a heavy thud. A gasp swept through the group as they rushed toward him. The cattle boss was quick on his horse, galloping to Jake's side. "Stay calm," he urged, assessing the situation with sharp eyes. The young drover lay still, wincing in pain as he clutched his leg, which was twisted at an awkward angle. Panic set in among the crew as they realized that Jake needed immediate help. While some held back the herd, keeping the remaining longhorns from stampeding into chaos, others gathered around their injured friend, concern etched on their faces. The camaraderie that had defined their day suddenly transformed into a desperate race against time, and all eyes turned to the cattle boss for guidance in this tense moment. The cattle boss knelt beside Jake, his heart racing as he quickly assessed the injured drover's leg. "Looks like a bad break," he murmured to himself, noting the swelling and the unnatural angle of Jake's foot. With no time to waste, he turned to the anxious crew. "We need to get him to shelter. Fast." He motioned for two of the drovers to help him lift Jake gently from the ground. Using a makeshift stretcher made from a saddle blanket and some sturdy sticks, they secured him as carefully as possible. The cattle boss gave quick but reassuring words, trying to calm Jake's fear while ensuring he remained still. "Hold on tight, buddy," he said, looking into Jake's eyes. "We're getting you out of here." As they began moving toward the ranch, the sound of hooves thundered in the distance. The boss glanced back and saw the longhorns getting restless again, their agitation rising like a wave ready to crash. "Keep moving," he urged. They hurried toward safety, knowing that the challenge was far from over. The deeper crisis loomed behind them as more chaos unfolded on the range, all while they focused on protecting their friend in this moment of need. As the crew carefully maneuvered Jake along the rough terrain, the cattle boss remained acutely aware of every bump and dip that could jolt the injured drover. The makeshift stretcher bounced slightly, and Jake winced at each jolt, prompting the boss to encourage him with a steady voice. Just a little further, buddy. You're doing great. The path ahead was filled with challenges, from thorny bushes that snagged at their legs to uneven ground where rocks threatened to trip them up. The boss led the way, keeping his eyes peeled for any signs of danger, knowing they had to reach safety quickly. His heart raced not only from concern for Jake but also from the nagging fear that the longhorns might break loose behind them. Suddenly, they heard a distant rumble, a sound that echoed through the hills and sent chills down their spines. The cattle boss glanced back, seeing a cloud of dust rising as the restless herd began to stampede in their direction. "Faster!" he called out urgently, pushing himself and his team to move as swiftly as possible while maintaining care for Jake. With every step, the stakes grew higher. Time was running out, and they needed to reach shelter before chaos erupted completely around them. As the group hurried forward, the cattle boss's instincts kicked into high gear. Suddenly, he spotted a rising cloud of dust in the distance, growing larger and closer with each passing moment. His heart sank as he realized what it was. The longhorns were stampeding right toward them, driven wild by unseen fears. "Look out!" he shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. He turned back to his crew, urgency etched on his face. "We need to get Jake to safety now." The sound of thundering hooves echoed through the air, rattling their nerves and quickening their pace. The boss made a swift decision to veer off the main path toward a nearby grove of trees, hoping they would provide some cover. As they reached the shade, he glanced over his shoulder at the herd, now just a few hundred yards away and barreling toward the corral, where other drovers were trying to guide the remaining cattle to safety. In that moment of crisis, time felt like it stood still. He could see both the panic in his crew's eyes and the threat of chaos closing in behind them. They had to act quickly to protect Jake and the rest of their herd from impending disaster. The ground trembled as the stampede of longhorns drew closer, their powerful hooves pounding against the earth like thunder. Dust billowed into the air, swirling around them and obscuring the horizon as the massive beasts charged forward with wild determination. The sound of their lowing filled the air, a deep and primal rumble that sent shivers down the spines of those nearby. With every heartbeat, the cattle boss could see the gleaming horns and muscular bodies of the longhorns surging ahead, their eyes wide and frantic. They moved as a unit, a tidal wave of chaos and raw energy, driven by instinct and fear. The boss felt his pulse quicken. He knew that one misplaced step could lead to disaster. "Stay calm," he shouted to his crew, though his own heart raced in response to the impending danger. As the herd barreled closer, the wind picked up, carrying with it a mix of fear and adrenaline. The longhorns kicked up clumps of dirt, creating a cloud that hung in the air like a curtain of impending doom. In that moment, it became clear. They were at the mercy of nature's fury, and there was no turning back. The urgency to protect Jake intensified as they sought refuge from the oncoming stampede. The cattle boss's mind raced as he weighed his options, the thunderous approach of the longhorns echoing in his ears. He crouched low beside Jake, whose face was pale with pain and fear. "We need to get you out of here," he whispered urgently, but knew that abandoning the rest of the crew could lead to disaster. A glance back toward the corral revealed that chaos was breaking out. The remaining cattle were restless, their instinct to flee evident as they approached the open ground. The sight of the stampeding longhorns stoked an icy dread in his gut. If they didn't rally to protect the corral, it could turn into a complete catastrophe. "All right, listen up," he called to the crew, his voice firm despite the quickening pace of his heart. "Two of you stay with Jake and keep him secure. The rest, follow me. We need to protect those cattle." His decision made, he felt a surge of resolve. This was not just about saving one drover. It was about safeguarding their livelihood and everyone in their care. The urgency of the moment spurred them into action as they raced toward the corral, knowing every second counted in this critical fight against nature's fury. As the cattle boss rallied his team, the remaining drovers sprang into action, their faces set with determination. They knew the risks but felt a deep sense of loyalty to each other and their shared responsibility for the herd. With hearts racing and adrenaline pumping, they checked their ropes and mounted their horses, ready to face the impending chaos together. "Stay close," one of the drovers shouted, his voice steady despite the turmoil around them. They formed a line, positioning themselves at strategic points to intercept the stampeding longhorns. Each drover took a deep breath, focusing on the task at hand, understanding that their teamwork would be crucial to managing this crisis. As the longhorns barreled closer, hooves thundered against the earth, sending vibrations through their bodies. The sight was both breathtaking and terrifying. Massive horns glinting in the sunlight and powerful bodies charging forward with wild energy. With a shared glance of unspoken courage, the drovers prepared to move as one cohesive unit. They positioned themselves to guide the herd away from the corral while keeping an eye on each other's safety. In that moment, they embodied bravery and solidarity, ready to do whatever it took to protect both Jake and their livelihood from disaster. The moment of truth arrived as the sound of thundering hooves grew louder, echoing in their ears like an approaching storm. The cattle boss signaled for his crew to move, and with a shared understanding, they surged forward as one cohesive unit. Each drover knew their role. Some expertly maneuvered their horses to create a barrier while others shouted commands, guiding the longhorns away from the corral. The dust rose in frantic clouds around them, thickening the air as panic clawed at their hearts. Yet, amidst the chaos, each man remained focused. The boss shouted directions, urging his crew to steer the herd toward a safe clearing, while keeping a watchful eye on Jake and the rest of the team. Together, they formed an impenetrable line, using ropes and sheer willpower to redirect the stampede. Longhorns surged against their blockade, snorting and bellowing, but the drovers stood firm. "Keep pushing. We can do this," one yelled, determination igniting their spirits. In that climactic moment, they harnessed their bravery and camaraderie, facing nature's fury head-on, to protect each other and their livelihoods from disaster. The outcome hung in balance as they fought against time and instinct for control over the chaos. As the dust settled and the thunder of hooves faded into the distance, a heavy silence hung in the air. The drovers stood together, their hearts still racing from the chaos that had just unfolded. The cattle boss took a moment to scan the area, ensuring that everyone was safe before turning his attention back to Jake, who was still lying on the makeshift stretcher. "Let's check on each other," he called out, breaking the tension. One by one, they began to regroup, moving toward one another with concern etched on their faces. Relief washed over them as they realized that despite their close call, everyone was unharmed. Jake managed a weak smile. "I knew you guys would save me," he said, his voice trembling but filled with gratitude. The boss knelt beside him again, checking the bandage on his leg and reassuring him that help was on the way. The crew exchanged stories of bravery amidst fear, their voices rising and falling like a comforting melody, and laughter soon broke through the remnants of panic. They shared plans for repairing fences and calming the remaining cattle, united in their sense of purpose once more. In that moment, the strength of their bond became clear. Together, they could face whatever challenges lay ahead. In the quiet that followed the stampede, a sense of profound reflection settled over the ranch. The drovers gathered, their faces still marked by adrenaline, but softened by a shared understanding of the day's events. They regarded one another not just as co-workers, but as a family forged in the fires of crisis. The cattle boss spoke up, his voice steady and reassuring. "Today, we learned what true bravery means. Not just facing danger alone, but standing together as one." His words resonated deeply. Each drover felt the truth in them, knowing that their collective strength had made all the difference. They shared their thoughts on teamwork, acknowledging that everyone played a vital role in navigating the unexpected challenges. It was clear that the bond they had was stronger than any adversity they might face in the future. As they recounted stories of courage during those frantic moments, laughter mixed with somber nods underscored the lessons learned. The community spirit among them had blossomed anew, reminding them that while individual skills are important, it is their unwavering support for one another that truly defines their success. With hearts full of gratitude and resolve, they prepared to rebuild not only their physical surroundings, but also the deep connections that would see them through any storm ahead. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Painting the sky with hues of orange and purple, the cattle boss stood with his team, reflecting on the day's fierce challenges. The adrenaline that had coursed through their veins began to fade, replaced by a profound sense of accomplishment and unity. They had faced chaos head-on, and together they emerged victorious. The drovers shared smiles and laughter, each one acknowledging the pivotal role they played in protecting their ranch and each other. The boss felt immense pride in his crew, recognizing not only their bravery, but also their willingness to act selflessly in times of crisis. It was in these tough moments that true character revealed itself. As they began to repair fences and tend to the cattle, a sense of renewed purpose settled over them. They were more than just co-workers. They were a family bonded by shared struggles and triumphs. Together, they reaffirmed their commitment to one another and their way of life on the rugged ranch. With hearts full of gratitude, the cattle boss and his team prepared for whatever lay ahead, knowing that as long as they stood together, they could overcome any challenge that came their way. Their strength lay not just in individual skill but in their solidarity as a community.